Okay, so we're live. So I'm Stephanie Bryant, and I am the Scrum Master at Roll20. And I'm here with Steve Kunst.
Hi, I'm Steve Kuntz. I'm the lead developer for Roll20.
And we are here to answer questions about designing Roll20, using Roll20, kind of a Q&A platform for GauntletCon, which Robert is involved with.
Right. So yeah, I'm Robert Angus, member of the Gauntlet, and I'm just here to moderate this panel, take questions, take answers. I personally have, I looked it up, it's 276 hours that I've spent on Roll20. So I hope that I can reasonably answer or, facilitate this.
Great. And then we have a couple of people from the Gauntlet community who have joined us. We have Chris and JM. I guess Chris and JM, what would you say is your level of experience with Roll20?
This is JM. I use it as my map for my home games, and I play on it every, I'd say like once a month I play in a game on it.
Okay. Chris?
Yeah, I've played a good bit on it, both as a player and as a GM, I've had good experiences with it online. I haven't tried it as an at-home tabletop yet, because usually I've got a battle map that I'm always itching to use if I actually get people over to my house. So
cool.
Since coming to work at Roll20, the amount of money I can forgive in buying Roll20 associated, role-playing game associated tools like dice or dice towers and whatnot has gone way down since I never end up using them anymore. So it's hard to justify buying that really awesome $100 pair of dice, so.
I kind of feel that way, but at the same time, I just got a really nice set of metal dice, and they're from Norse Foundry, and I'm like, I would buy those.
So good.
Yeah, I would buy them again.
Yeah.
They came in the mini hex box from Elderwood Creations, and like, no, I would buy those again. Yeah, definitely. I'm considering getting like another set for somebody for Christmas. Like, yeah, they're so nice. And they were so convenient. I was at the convention last weekend, and I just had them hanging around my neck all weekend, and I never lost my dice. It was great. So anyway, so
let's talk about Roll20.
Let's do that. Yeah. We like dice. Okay. Yeah, so that's great. So it sounds like both of you are fairly experienced. So we don't have to give the basics of what is Roll20 and like how would you join it or use it or start a game or anything like that, which is fantastic. Steve, do you want to like talk a little bit about like maybe two of your favorite tips and tricks that people, even with a lot of experience, don't necessarily know? Like, there's a ton that I've learned just since working with you.
Sure. It actually would probably be useful if either you or I drove and shared our screen with the virtual tabletop, so I could talk about it and you could point at it instead of people just trying to imagine what I'm talking about. Like,
right.
So give somebody some concrete examples.
Do you want to drive and then?
Sure.
Yeah. And I'm gonna.
All right, let me figure out, how do I share my screen?
There's a little button on the left side. If you go over to the left side of your Hangout, that says screen share. I hope that you have that button. You might not have that button.
I do.
Oh, good.
All right, here we go. So on to Roll20. Let's go into a D&D game with lots of fun, flashy tokens already set up. And so let's talk about some of the things that I think are super cool about Roll20 that I'm not sure everybody knows about. I I think most people are familiar with like the dice rolling syntax. So if you hit slash slash R1d20, you're going to roll a d20. Not everyone knows that we have this thing called inline rolls, which is where you can put the text of or the result of a roll inside what would just be a normal text message. So if I wanted to whisper to the game master, I cast, and then you can put it, the syntax for it is basically these double brackets. If I do 1d6 fireballs, right, and the result is the GM is going to get a 1d6 roll in the text of the actual message. And then for those of you who are smarty pants and already knew that, one other thing you can do is if you do single brackets inside the double brackets, you can label it. So if I put the label of fireballs, and I did that again, when you do hover over for the tooltip, the fireballs label ends up in the roll. So that's super handy when you have like really complex systems for things like, Dungeons and Dragons, Pathfinder, games with a lot of different variables, that you can have all of those variables spelled out for you in the roll, even if it's a compacted inline roll. So you can get a lot of information. So it's not just gobbledygook. When you go and look back, it's like, I don't know where plus 17 came from. I have no idea. But if you go in there, you can label it and cut it apart after the fact. Also, something that people might not know is there's this, on both this inline roll and right here on the normal roll, there's this quantum symbol. And frequently people ask me what the hell that means. they have no clue. Well, it's actually tied to our quantum roll dice randomizer. So as no surprise that probably anyone in this call, us nerds care deeply about our randomness. We care about about the shape of our dice and how random our random is. And there's a lot of myths around computerized randomness and computer clocks and sources of entropy. So we went to the absolute extreme for our users in the form of randomness, and we actually get from a third-party service a beam, particles of light. Photons hitting particles, and the way they interact at the quantum level to generate our entropy, to generate our seeds. So that means that as far as we know it, the most unpredictable thing in the universe, a thing that cannot be predicted beforehand, is actually our sources of entropy. And we're pretty proud of the results of this. So we've made a couple of pages. One's an explanation page on our wiki, and this other one, the status page, is actually what I want to show you. So this is out of the last hour. There have been, it looks like, several 100,000 D20 rolls, and as you can see, the level of randomness to them is within under a fraction of a percent across the board. And
wow.
the bigger the sample size you get, so yeah, just in the last hour, there were about 500,000 D20 rolls, and they are just so much even more random than you would get from plastic molded injected dice. The kind of the most common dice out there, which is there's a mold and plastic gets injected into them. The amount of the just very minute imperfections that a person playing at a table would never notice were even more random than that. And what the symbol back over here in our game means right here is that we've certified this roll as having that seed, and the result has come from our dice servers that use that entropy. So no one can cheat. because it authoritatively came from our server and not from somebody's computer, and it used a source of entropy that is off the charts good.
So when I critically fail, like it was meant to be.
It was
It was meant to be.
It was very random. And well, that's interesting because a question that comes up to us all the time is, well, your dice are clearly broken because I've rolled 4 1s in a row. And it turns out human beings are amazing at finding patterns, even when those patterns don't exist. Like we see a man's face in the moon. Not that there's a man's face in the moon, but because our brains are hardwired to find patterns and recognize those patterns. And the thing about actual randomness is that there is no pattern. If you didn't get strings of 5 1s, something would be really bad with your randomness. And unfortunately, sometimes you're that guy, as improbable as it is, to get the long string of 20s or 1s or everything in between. I probably should stop for questions now and then, shouldn't I?
Probably.
Anybody have any questions on inline rolls or the quantum dice or anything like that?
I have a question. If you are, let's say you want to do an inline roll where you're rolling multiple dice like together.
Yeah.
Would you do 2 separate set of double brackets to do something like that, or how would you need to work that out?
So the brackets are going to give everything that's in them as a result. So if you want them side by side to one another, you would put them in different inline rolls. If you want the entire thing handled together as one final product, you'd put it in the same inline roll.
Okay.
We have some pretty complex syntax that lets you do grouping as well. Like if you wanted to know what the final result of 6 sets of D20 rolls that were greater than a particular number versus, which was higher, that or a set of D4s that explode. Like you could do all of that in one equation. On our wiki, and I'm going to end up probably going back to this wiki over and over again. We have really great information here, and I think it's an underutilized tool. We have a dice reference right here on our wiki that breaks down the equations and how to get the mechanics that you want working. There's very few games, if any, that I don't think our dice mechanics support. And we even have this cool thing baked in right into the wiki that's linked to our quantum roll that I keep talking about, where you can just put in your roll right here, hit enter, and it'll give you the results with the same level of randomness that exists on the rest of the site. So you can read it, look at the syntax, play with it right there in its space. So I didn't want, 10d6. I wanted 10d10. What does that look like? So.
That was way more complicated than I was. I was thinking, like, what if I have a wizard who's casting magic missile and shooting 3 or 4 magic missiles at once, and I'm shooting 3 magic missiles, and I need to know 3 different.
I would do those as separate things because those magic missiles can go different places. So I would do something that looks like this, where I have 3 1d4 plus 1s right next to each other. There are our Roll20 API can even automate that a step further by generating a roll that has n number of 1d4 plus 1 rolls. So like if you wanted to upcast it. But that said, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about our Roll20 character sheet. I actually don't know whose this game is that I've copied.
Oh, no.
So hopefully there's nothing too inappropriate in here. But let me talk for just a quick moment about our compendium and how cool our compendium is. So our compendium has the majority of the content of the rules, depending on how much of the SRD rules you're using versus the player's handbook, which is for sale on Roll20, versus the monster's manual that's for sale on Roll20. But if I look at spells, and we're talking about we were talking about magic missile, So underneath the spells section, I have all manner of spells. So let's filter this down to, I know magic missiles level 1, and it's got, I think that's enough. So I'm just going to bring it down to level 1 spells, which there's still a ton.
There are. It was
So
because you misspelled magic missile, by the way.
is it?
That's why you didn't find it in the search.
This is why I need to not drive and talk at the same time.
Right.
Is magic missile, and baked into the character sheet already is an idea of being able to higher cast or upcast things. So that's the idea of like 1 magic missile. But if I were going to hellishly rebuke someone, I could say, because that's a thing that you can upcast, I'm going to upcast it to a level 4 hellish rebuke. Oh, and I canceled. A level 4 hellish rebuke, and it does all of the math to know what a level 4 hellish rebuke's damage would be rather than a level 1 hellish rebuke. So I can tell you how to do it agnostically without using a character sheet from an inline roll. But if we're talking about magic missiles specifically, or Dungeons Dragons, Pathfinder, any of the games that are already supported with a character sheet, people have already done the work for you. That's one of the best things about the Roll20 is our community, is that people have already thought these things out, done the work for these things, and most of it's baked in and ready to roll for you the moment you get into the game.
Yeah, we have.
I was going to say, like, the API is pretty good, and actually the fact that you guys pull so much into the API really helps a lot.
Yep. So we have hundreds of character sheets, right, Steve?
I think it's in the range of 500, but
Yeah.
I don't have my numbers in front of me.
Yeah.
But yes, we have hundreds and hundreds of character sheets which help take Roll20, which is completely system agnostic. Every design decision we've made has been, there's this idea of token, there's this idea of a playing card, there's this idea of a map and potentially a grid, your ability to draw on things. So we made a completely game system agnostic system, but then our character sheets basically snap on top of the Roll20 virtual tabletop and support the specific game systems for your game, to take out the bookkeeping, to automate certain stuff, to do some math for you, basically create a centralized place for characters and handouts and specialized adventure materials.
So I will ask, is there any way to make that easier? Like right now, a lot of people in the Gauntlet community, I feel like, use Google Sheets. We have the concept of a character keeper, and it's usually a Google spreadsheet.
Mm-hmm.
How can we make that easier to do, just to make a character sheet, or to make this interactable sheet within Roll20?
So are we talking about a sheet that's not currently in Roll20, that's not supported, or one that might currently exist?
It's probably one that doesn't exist. A lot of the time, it's somebody who's just making their own game.
Can I jump in? Because I just did this.
Yeah, absolutely. Your perfect story. Go right ahead.
Okay. So we did Hacktoberfest recently, which was a hackathon for the devs. They took a week. They worked on whatever passion projects they had. And my passion project was something that I wanted to learn, which was how do I make a character sheet for Roll20? And it's hard. It's hard because it requires you to know HTML and to learn some of the subset of HTML that we offer, and CSS and some of the subset of CSS that we offer, because for security reasons, we don't want everything that you can do in HTML and CSS on the platform, because there's some things that it's like, oh no, that's a good way to break the game, right? And then it's bad for everybody. But for the most part, it's HTML and CSS, and if you keep it pretty clean, it comes out pretty good. Making a character sheet I wanted to make a character sheet for this game that I was running, I needed a pro subscriber account, which I have. And there's something called a custom sheet that you can set. So, Steve, can you pop over to the game that we were playing, the summer mini series, and go to the game settings page on that. So if you scroll down, you'll see custom. So this is my character sheet. And there's a CSS styling tab in there as well that has all of my styles set up. And when we play this game, now when we started, it was just like 4 fields, and I was like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I could make an HTML field. An HTML input field is pretty easy. Is it Sublime Text, Steve?
That I use, or that's represented here?
That's represented here?
Either.
Yeah, so this is a plugin. It's basically something that's just a code editor that's baked into the browser. But yes, it very much mimics the look of Sublime Text, which is
I love Sublime Text.
it's a fan. We're all fans of it on the Roll20 team. It's one of the more popular, code development tools.
Yeah. So anyway, so I made all of this, and the first iteration that I did was really, really plain and really ordinary. Steve, can you pop into that game and
Sure.
we can show them what it looks like now? After working on it for a while and working on it with Steve a lot, very patient developer, and just open one of our character sheets, and now it's a pretty nicely made character sheet for Drama System. I don't have any roles in it because Drama System doesn't really use dice. So that was one area that I was able to skip over everything about how do you make it a rollable character sheet. But there's a lot of information in the wiki about how to do that. As far as making this process easier, it is something that we are working on. We actually have a junior developer right now who a big project of hers is making it easier for people to author character sheets and for them to learn how to do so. And part of my process of doing this was writing down, where did I go wrong? How did it get messed up? What did I not know how to do? So
And some of our design decision behind opening up basically a sandbox for HTML and CSS, and there's some JavaScript in here as well, that to allow people to support the game systems that they love, is one, there's no way Roll20 could support every game system. Even if we wanted to, there's so many new role-playing games coming out every day that there's no way one business could keep up with supporting all of them. But you guys love these games, and so if we give you the tools to support them for your own game communities, it just benefits everyone. Everyone benefits when the community is working together to create and support the game systems. There are fans of games who haven't even been released yet, who get advanced copies of the games just so they can start working on the character sheets, so that the day that they're released, they can go live on Roll20.
And that's actually that's the other step, which is how do you get it to go live on Roll20? Mine is a custom sheet right now, but I have it waiting to be checked in on GitHub. So we do have a GitHub repository that is public. The Roll20 character sheets repository is publicly available for everybody. You can even go in here and make pull requests for sheets that you're not the author for, but there's some etiquette involved there. Like maybe you should talk to that person, if you can. But it's an open source repository for people to use and to change and to come up with their suggestions. So for example, I don't know what's a good example of one that obviously we've got even the ones that are by Roll20. So like here, if somebody came in and they're like, oh, I made a tweak to the HTML on the official OGL sheet that does this one thing and fixes this one little issue. Steve, we could conceivably like accept that, right?
And have in the past,
Yeah.
where people have gone and found little bugs or things that they think would be enhancements, and sometimes we can't take them, sometimes we do, and I mean, we want the community collaborating together on these character sheets to just make everybody's gaming experiences better. Like, we love these games, we want to support these games as best we can.
And what does the communication back and forth look like in that scenario? Like, where somebody says, "Hey, I want to do this thing to this character sheet," and you say, "Well, it doesn't really jive." How does that work?
Yeah, so it usually comes in one of 3 flavors. The primary one is through GitHub, and basically the way you submit the character sheet, requesting it get merged in and displayed on Roll20 is you do what's called a pull request. You've basically made a copy of this repository, you've added your code and said, hey, could you add, in the official repository, can you merge my code into the master code? And then at that point, it would become available for people to use on the Roll20 site. From like the one-click drop down, where you can just find the list of pre-prepared character sheets, and then anybody in our going on 4 million users can just immediately take advantage of. But oftentimes the other place that those conversations start are on our character sheet and compendium forums, which there is a really amazing community of content creators, of fans of these games. So this forum right here that answer people's questions when they have questions about why Roll20 made the decision to lock down the certain things that we've done in order to basically make them secure and safe, so that way we can just accept code and that it gets run in a sandbox that would be safe to pass to anybody's computer. And sometimes there's a few handful of tricks that people have come up with of getting what they want to get, the fancy high level HTML or CSS or JavaScript that they want to run to get the game effects or the game mechanics that they want represented specifically in the environment of the Roll20 sandbox. So I think this is a great resource for anyone who's thinking about making a character sheet, who wants to contribute to our compendiums, who is a fan of a specific game system and they want to support it better on Roll20. Cool. Any other questions about creating character sheets or?
Not really about creating character sheets, but there's a question about index cards. Like, are there any plans for something along the lines of editable index cards being put into the app?
Please vote for it on the forums, please.
Yeah.
Please.
There's a suggestion for it. So if you go to our suggestions forum and vote it, that's going to increase the likelihood that it's going to end up on the development team's
Please vote for it.
docket.
Please.
I personally, just as a lead developer for the site, want to give a lot of love to the card deck system that exists inside Roll20. Where's my game that's running? All the way back here. The card deck system we have it's still neat. It still does a lot of things. The thing is that it was written and designed kind of under the assumption that people would use it the way people play poker, and that's not necessarily true with many of the card games that exist today. There's certain features like being able to shuffle just part of a deck, or shuffle just the discard pile, or put the discard pile on top or underneath the current deck. So there's a handful of things that it doesn't currently do, but it does do a lot of great things. I can deal a card directly to the table. I can deal a card directly to I can deal it face down rather than face up. I can deal a card to someone's specific hand. So I just dropped it on my profile, and now I have one card in my hand. I have a second card in my hand. So here's my hand. I can make a hand. I can play it from my hand. It does a lot of things. You can trade cards between players, between your hands. You can ask to steal a random card. There's lots of really great functionality here, and so it's like it pains me because we're almost there. Like if we could get back around to it and spend a little bit more time, I think, with a couple major development cycles, we could get it to the point where it could support every major card game out there, and really open up Roll20 to be able to support, all the fun card games that us gamers love. And then part of that would be having cards that you could then write on, in a way that you would drop them down, and then any text written on them ad hoc would stay on them, and then they could be flipped over and whatnot. So that's definitely a feature we've discussed at Roll20, something we'd like to do, but is not currently in the timeline for other features that I think Stephanie and I are going to be allowed to tease a little bit at the end of this program today. We'll talk about what is coming down the pipeline soon. So should I continue on down my list of cool tips and tricks, or do you guys have some other questions?
Well, I did want to bring up the idea of Charles brought up the idea of taking pull requests from the community, and it's mostly front end stuff. Is there any plan to publicize the backend API?
I'm not sure I understand your question. So you're asking, is there any plans on our part to talk about the architecture of what makes Roll20 function?
Well, I mean, even just a backend API, like for me personally, like being able to see, I would create this token, and that gives me access to certain games, and being able to see who's in those games, and automate a lot of stuff in a site like the Gauntlet site.
Yeah, like a REST API that would connect externally,
Yes.
like to external databases.
Yeah.
It is something we've discussed, but unfortunately not at this time. Not anything that we could comment on. It's not something that we haven't investigated, but we don't have anything that we could announce for support for like a REST API that would be available to the public.
We do have the API that is game specific, though.
Right.
That gives you access to like a lot of, I don't know, a lot of little automations within a game, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the API basically lets you any level of game support, system support that couldn't be handled by a character sheet. That's where the Roll20 API comes in, and there's very little it can't do inside a game to make whatever system you're playing, whatever mechanics you have. I will go on record saying that I don't think that there's any game that the API cannot handle the mechanics for.
Yeah, I'm actually kind of selfish in this fact because I started on Roll20 and just recently came into the Gauntlet. And so to me, it's like, why don't we do everything on Roll20? But for whatever reason, we don't. And so I just want to, bridge those gaps.
Right.
And we have, our community manager, and we have people at Roll20 that would be interested in hearing how we could better support your communities. Like, we care about you guys having the tools that you need to make Roll20 as a powerful organizational tool for you and your organization's games. Like, we want your groups using Roll20 and being able to use Roll20 as a place to gather and communicate.
One of the projects that Steve has had as a passion project for, like, as long as you've worked here, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Is the Supergroups, which is it's not really even a code word, but it's our term for groups where there's a whole bunch of players who are all playing either a shared world or shared campaign, or sometimes it's just, an organizational goal. Like we have one super group that all of their games might be different systems, might be different, all different GMs and everything, but all of their games are text only. And that makes them a super group. So it's kind of the birds of a feather kind of thing. And Gauntlet is certainly one of those types of groups, those communities where it's like, this is a large community of users that different games, arise out of it. And supporting supergroups that's an ongoing development goal that we like every quarter we talk about, like, what are some things that can move us closer to that.
I mean,
I love the rock and roll feel of the super group. Like, I
yeah,
like that.
like
yeah,
it's a super group. Yeah.
and because the focus has always been the traditional gaming group is between 2 to 3 people and 8 to 10 people, kind of on the high end, and that's where our focus has been. But we understand that, just like Roll20's solving problems in a new way, role-playing game communities look different than they did 20 years ago. And, being able to support the new face of what role-playing game organizations and fan clubs and system clubs and, French groups and Spanish-speaking groups and Russian-speaking groups, like having support for people who have, a larger organization or a larger web of, interests is, like Stephanie said, it's a passion project for me. I think that's one of the keys to making our hobby more accessible to everyone in the whole world, is having places with individual interests that are more accessible than just coming to the front page of Roll20, or maybe even more accessible than going to your local hobby shop, because sometimes that's not accessible for many people either because you don't have a hobby shop or because its environment isn't something that would draw you in. So it's important for me that we create a whole range of environments so that people coming to Roll20, they can find the right one for them. They can find the right group for them. Cool. Any other questions before I start rambling? All right. So,
do you want to show off what's on the dev server right now?
Okay. Yeah, I can do that. We can get right into the teasing.
Yeah. So this is something that, so I mentioned that we did this hackathon at the beginning of October. And one of the things that we did was a couple of those pieces that were done that week were almost ready to be released. So the Tuesday after that, we put them on the dev server, and the dev server is a kind of a beta testing server for pro users. So if you have a pro account, you have access to this server. It's roll20dev.net, and you can copy your games into it. You can create a game on it. If you have a game on it, you can invite your players to play in it, even if they're not pro users. So it's not locked to pro users. So here we are, and there were 2 features that we developed that our developers worked on. So one of them is handouts. So here we have here's a handout.
Not a very good one, but it's
not a very interesting one, but it's a handout, and Steve is going to make a copy of it.
So one of the new features we've added is the ability to copy a handout, just like you can copy a character sheet. So it'll carry all of the notes, all of the GM notes, the picture that's attached to it, the name,
and the ownership.
So when you duplicate it, it'll add it to the bottom of your journal as a copy of it. So that's going to make, I've use cases that I've heard for this that are really compelling are making a template for something that you need for a handout, and then just having that master template and making copies of it for the individual, maybe magic items that you want to add to your game, or maybe you're adding specific NPCs that just need to be handouts and they don't need a character sheet attached to them. So being able to churn out and copy those types of things is going to be very useful.
So that's one of them. And, it seems like a fairly simple thing, but it wasn't in our code base before. And in a couple days, one of our developers, she cranked it out, and it will be probably released next week to everybody. And then the other thing is we have a dice roller that is in the toolbar over on the left side. And it's a very simple, like, if you don't know the syntax to put things in the chat window, or you just forgot, or your keyboard broke, which happens to me once in a while, you can pop it up, and there's a little thing, a little window that you can open, and select the dice that you want and how many you want to roll and everything else, right? And that's just the regular dice roller. Well, having to click to pop it open is a couple extra steps to being able to roll your dice. So one of our developers made a little hover selector. So here you just hover over it, and then you can roll right there. You can roll up to 5 of each type of dice. You can make it an inline roll. It's a little toggle that will stick. You can make it a whisper to the GM only roll, which is nice. So if it's like, hey, I'm rolling a lot of this type of die, and I want to send it to the GM, all the time, like just right there.
And then if you're wondering where the old dice roller pop-up went, it's right here at the bottom. So if you still want this dialogue, we haven't gotten rid of it. It's still here, that if this is a more useful tool for you, you can have it up all the time. And you want to find your previously made rolls, all the things that this used to do for you. It's still here, it still exists. But we think that this more accurately represents what people need for quickly banging out a roll. Like you're in a D&D game, but for some reason you need to make a percentage roll. So you have the D100 down here, which isn't something that's probably baked into a character sheet anywhere. You can just come over here and grab it. So whatever your traditional gaming dice set can do, the ones that you would buy from Chessex or wherever, that's what we're trying to replicate for you to be able to do here.
And then at the top there's a couple of those. Like I said, there's the GM roll, there's the inline roll. The exclamation point is the exploding dice.
Mm-hmm.
Double exclamation is
the same thing. The exclamation point rolls an extra die, and the double exclamation point adds the die to itself.
Right.
So depending on how your system handles exploding, you're either one bang or 2 bangs for getting the results that you want.
And the exclamation with a P is
penetrating dice, which is again a specific kind of mechanic for depending on how you need your dice that re-roll or crit or critically fail to behave. Those are all advanced options that you can read about in the dice reference wiki.
Right.
Is there any desire to add like a pop-up or like some sort of tooltip to those, just to say like, hey, here's what double exploding actually means?
Well, it's kind of already a pop-up, right? Because it's a hover selector.
Maybe I'm not seeing it on the screen, but yeah, okay.
No, I mean it doesn't have a tooltip, but because it already is, it's already like activated by hover.
I think a link to this dice reference I keep talking about would probably be useful in the virtual tabletop in general. Maybe here, maybe in a different place. But I hear what you mean. Like these are kind of arcane symbols. There's a lot of things in Roll20 that unless you're a power user and kind of have figured them out, they're not terribly accessible. And that's something that we're very aware of and something we want to make easier. Like the tools that are there are system agnostic, but there's so many cool features that have been added on that make it faster and easier that people usually don't figure out until they've explored to try and solve a problem. And we want to make those solutions easier to find.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, my whole thing is like I would just go through and be like, yes, I need all of this.
Right. Yeah. The
So
problem
being
is
able to know what I'm doing is
like
yeah.
I want to print out a card and just hang it next to my monitor, like we used to do with like the VI commands for Unix, or any other like our like the DOS commands, like just have like the little quick reference of my dice reference.
Yeah, and the third thing, well, let me talk about the hackathon real quick, and then we'll talk about the third thing that'll be coming down the pipe that I can't show you guys yet because I'm not allowed to. But
Soon.
I want to tease it at least a little bit. I want to just talk about the hackathon a little bit in general, which is it's important to me as the lead designer for Roll20 that Roll20 stays basically the forefront of the technology that's available to us, that as web tools and web technology continue to advance, we got to keep up with those. And also that the vast majority of the developers at Roll20 are big fans of the product, that use the product on their own time regularly for their own games. And so they have really good ideas about what needs to get tweaked or fixed or what cool new features should exist. So I, in the spirit of, Hacktoberfest and the storied history of opening up code in different ways, I wanted, at least for this first year that we were trying this experiment, to give an extended period of time for the team to work on a whole bunch of different random projects that had no deliverables required at all. Go experiment, have fun, and at the end of the experiment, if you have nothing other than a fun story or something that you've learned, then you still succeeded at what I was hoping we'd get out of it. And we've gotten so many cool things. I'm things I can't talk about because they're only half done, and I'm not sure they're ever going to make it live. But some really awesome, just amazing ideas came out of it, and I'm looking forward to, over the next 6 months, seeing if we can get some of them polished and out the door, along with the other deliverables that the dev teams required. One of those is my project that I ended up working on. I'm as I chronically get yelled at by Stephanie, I'm not supposed to be coding. I'm supposed to be managing at this point, and designing. But I took Hacktoberfest as an excuse to get back into the code base and do a project for myself. You'll hear me talk about accessibility a lot. It's probably the most important thing to me about working at Roll20 and designing Roll20 is removing barriers between people and games. That getting more people into the hobby and growing the hobby, it's a rising tide. It raises all ships. The more games that exist, the more publishers that exist, the more ideas that are out there, the more games, and if it makes it so that there are groups and games that I'll never participate in, it's still going to end up benefiting me down the road because it's going to train a new generation of role players that I'm going to get to role play someday with at a con and meet some awesome people. So I'm all about removing barriers that keep people from playing games. The obvious one being, you might not have a gaming store or a gaming group that's in physical proximity to you, and you can get on Roll20 and you can play anyways. That's the obvious one. But then one of my very first projects that I did when I got to Roll20 was translations. So we translated the site now into 22 languages to make it accessible to people who might not be English speakers, and on and on and on and on. So my most recent project, the one I took on for Hacktoberfest, directly deals with the complaint I hear from a lot of people about how hard it is to find a game. They're new to the hobby, or their gaming group just fell apart. we have a looking for group tool. I think that looking for group tool is awesome. I talk about it all the time. I use it all the time. I regularly, I have an alternate account that is in no way tied to Steve K at Roll20 that I anonymously play with random nerds on the internet because I don't want to have to answer Roll20 related topics the whole time I play with them. But I regularly go on and I use this tool to find groups and play. But I thought it could be better. And so the tool that will be coming out soon, TM, is my hackathon project for how I thought that looking for group tool could be better, and how we could use it to break down a barrier that currently exists to finding games.
You know, Steve, all of those people you game with now know your voice.
That's true. Actually, I mean, I have a funny anecdote. It's kind of off topic, but one of my gaming groups, I got outed because they wanted to use Skype for voice for one particular night, and I hadn't realized that my Skype picture was the same one that I used for my profile picture on Roll20, and somebody mid game recognized my picture and went, "Oh my gosh, you're the guy who answered my question on the forum. You're the guy." And I'm like, "Oh no."
Oh no.
And then the cat was out of the bag.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's bitten me more than once, Stephanie. So you're not wrong.
So to get a little bit back on topic, one of the things that was going back and forth in the chat is, there's this concept, like Roll20 sort of tries to do everything, as in, there's voice chat, there's video, there's everything. And yet here we are using Google Hangouts. How do we bridge the gap of getting people to do everything in Roll20 versus doing, here's your dice rolling in Roll20 and your board gaming, and Discord is this other thing that you use. And
I will take the controversial stance that I think that that's not actually a problem. I think that Roll20 focuses on being the best virtual tabletop we can be. We're going to create a lot of tools around the tabletop experience, but we're not the best VoIP company in the world. So if you in your group find Discord better than the integrated video and voice chat, do what's good for your group, right? There are entire companies, Skype has hundreds and hundreds of employees at Microsoft that do nothing but work on that product, and that's okay, right? That allows them to go very narrow and very deep into a particular tool. And so if that meets your needs better. That said, I only use Roll20 video and voice because I like the screen real estate that it saves me. Like, I don't want to have another window open. And there's some cool tools that we baked in there, like whispering. And there's, being able to move the avatars wherever you want them to be on the page. Oh gosh, I think it is not on because I don't have two people. I can't actually do a call because I don't have two people in my game. That makes sense. That there's ways of baking those things directly into Roll20. Like, I think character sheets have a tremendous amount of power because they can be baked right into Roll20. They can interface with the Compendium. They can automate dice rolls, and they keep all of your characters. Nobody's going to lose their paper character sheet because it's saved on the internet attached to this game. It's never going to go away, So I think that campaign management becomes easier in Roll20. I think I would prefer everyone do everything there, but I don't think people need to. I think you use the tool whatever works best for your group.
Yeah, I'll confess, my weekly group, we now use Discord for our voice. We don't use video. That's just not a thing that our players want to do. And Discord works for us. It works for everybody in my group. And the Roll20 video and voice, it didn't work great for one of our players. One of our players he's like on a mountain in Tennessee and pretty remote, and so he found that there was some connection issue that he kept running into. So Discord worked; it works for us. So
yeah. So I mean, the built-in video, I still think's great. It can basically, you can rearrange it so if like turn order around a table matters, you can literally put people around a table, put their faces around a table, depending on the game that you're using. I like that you can customize the avatar size. So if you're using voice only, you can turn off the avatar box. But usually I'm the one who ends up making it large so that it's as big as possible, so I can see the people that I'm playing with. You can see we have the voice monitoring, so you can see it. We have the ability to pause your video, pause your audio. I think it's a cool tool. I think it's come a tremendously long way since when we first started. I know we've had some bumps and some hiccups, but I'm really proud of what we've gotten this to be able to do, and as stable as we've gotten it to become.
I'm also really happy with the improvements that we're making on it. So one of the things that we've been working on is just improving performance on a lot of things that they won't be flashy releases, but they will make the whole experience just a little smoother and reduce friction for players all around. So I'm kind of excited because the video and voice is one of those areas that we've put some effort into, and so like it's nice to see that improving. So yeah.
Yeah, and kind of going back to the chat a little bit, Charles, you were talking about some video and audio stuff. Like having a Chromebook or a tablet or something next to you is a good example of when you would need like another thing and doing all the video differently.
Yeah, certainly playing in person is a different experience than playing only through your computer, where you're only interacting through a webcam and a monitor. But I think that all of the stuff that I was just ranting about, with keeping the character sheets in the same place and the bookkeeping that it provides you, and dynamic lighting as a concept that can't really be replicated with a physical board but can be done with a virtual board, make Roll20 a really cool tool for even in-person play. And that's something that we certainly want to explore much more deeply than we currently are. Create tools specifically for that experience. Because right now our focus has been people playing on the internet together in games between 3 and 10 people. And as Roll20 grows and as our development team grows, we're going to have more resources to point at people who are using the tool in ways that aren't the original way it was designed. So expanding support for in-person games, for potentially playing it on different devices. All of that is stuff that we're excited about, that we're interested in doing, and I hope to see in the future.
So, not to take this in a completely different direction, but is there any hope to add something for like safety tools, like the X card or lines and veils, or some way of automating that process? I mean, there's an app that we use that kind of does that.
Do you want to take this one, Stephanie? I think you're muted.
Yes, I am muted. So yes, and can't entirely discuss it just yet. But one of the things we are in the process of doing a lot of research on that, and so one of the things that, because we're all very passionate and excited and everything else, and one of the things that we have to like be alert to is doing things right, especially when it comes to safety tools. And so a lot of times we'll do things fast and then fix it and move on. With safety tools, we want to do it really well. So that's something that we are working on and actively researching. It's a passion project for, I think, 2 or 3 people in the company that just really care a lot and want to get into it. And when we have that, we will have it, and we will have it in a way that like is good and feels like it's the right implementation.
I love that. I just love that. Yeah. I mean, that you guys are actually caring and working on doing that. That means a lot.
There's not an easy answer to it just in general. There's answers. There's lots of answers out there. There's lots of different safety mechanics. There's lots of different iterations and implementations and philosophies on the right way to do safety mechanics.
And there's lots of workarounds for now
It's
that
true.
people use. So there's that too. Like there's a lot of ways that people have implemented X cards in their games on Roll20 already. So, there's the workarounds right now. They're awkward in some ways, and so is an index card on the table in some ways. So, we definitely we care. We want it to come out good and positive. So yeah. I did see in the Discord chat, someone was asking about, Asher said, I've had issues with Roll20 copying map tiles between pages of a game. So if there's tips for keeping things in place, that would be great. And I wondered if we can answer that, Steve.
Sure. So I'm going to guess that the question is, we're copying and pasting tiles that have been laid out in a particular order, and them being grouped when they moved from page to page in the same organization. So the best, suggestion that I have is Roll20 is a really flexible tool. It can do just about everything. That doesn't mean it does everything the best. The best way of handling a whole bunch of map tiles, in my opinion, is to lay it out the way that you want to, and either do a screen capture or do it in Photoshop of where you lay out the design you want to and export it as a single image, because it's going to be more performant for your players. It's going to load faster into your game, and then the organization and the layout can't get junked up. Stuff on the token layer, it's always going to move around. Your tokens are going to run around. But stuff on your map layer, if you know the experience that you want to give, it would be my recommendation to, either copy and paste the whole thing on that layer from one. Make sure you're doing Control A to grab everything on the layer and copying it, and then moving to the map layer on the other page, pasting it on that layer. And then if you are holding down the Alt key, you can, by using the directional arrows, you can pixel by pixel adjust the things that you're trying to move to get it exactly lined up the way you want to. The Alt key across Roll20 is the I want to move it just a little bit key. It's the same thing that will keep it from snapping to like the grid. So if you hold down Alt, it won't snap to the grid when you move it. So whenever you're moving or positioning things, try the Alt and the Shift keys. They tweak the experience slightly to give you a different experience if you need it. So that would be my recommendation for moving a whole collection of things, whether that's tiles from one page to another, or tokens. Like if you have your party all there, I would copy the whole group and drop it, and then hold down the Alt key to get it dialed into exactly the place that you want it to be.
Another cool thing that just recently went live a couple weeks ago. Speaking of the Alt key, this is one of my favorite things right now is Alt double click.
Yeah. So, I'm not. What
You're
layer
not
am
on
I?
the you're
Oh,
you're
that
on the
is
token.
okay. Here, this guy. He's probably a character. We'll find
Yeah.
out. Is he representing a character? He is a bugbear.
Okay.
So, if you hold down Alt and if you double click on the token without holding down Alt, it's going to open up this token menu where you can edit the token, what character sheet it's related to, what its radial menus look like. However, if you hold down Alt, instead, it's going to bring you strictly to the character sheet that's related to the token that you've set the token to represent. So it's a hot key to just jump right into the tool, into the roles that you need. So that way you can make your role, and then if you can either close it and then just get back to it with an Alt double click again, or a tool that I see a lot of people not knowing about is any dialogue in Roll20. If you double click on it, you'll minimize it and it'll be vaguely transparent, and you can move this around wherever you want to so it's not in the way, and then you just double click on it again to bring it back. So it's a way of, rather than having to pop it out, which again is a perfectly viable option for people who have multiple monitors or would just like it on a different like completely removed from the experience so they can only access it when they want to. Another way of doing it, if you only have one monitor, is just to minimize it for yourself.
Yep. I actually use the pop out a lot, and then I Alt tab as I need to.
Yeah, back and forth between them.
Yep.
Again, Roll20's philosophy is to try and create tools that we think will be useful, and we'll probably do two parallel tools, a primary one and kind of like a secondary one, so that way we think most people are going to want to do it this way, but then there's this other way over here to do it if that works better for your particular use case. Do we have any other questions from the chat? Anybody else have anything they want to know?
No, looks like it's pretty quiet.
Cool.
Well,
Chris,
then,
do you have any other questions for us since you were so kind as to join us in our chat today?
No, I think you've filled in a lot of the gaps. Honestly, I've been playing for like a year and a half, and I never knew about the ability to minimize the character window. So
I found it by accident. I minimized. I was like, "Where did my character sheet go?"
that's awesome. I've run like 4 or 5 games myself. I've played in a lot more, and I never knew I could do that.
well, then I'm going to just jump into some other cool tips and tricks that I think people might not know about. One of my favorites is most people know that if they hold down left the mouse button, they're going to ping on the virtual tabletop. However, what you might not know is that if you're a GM in the game and you hold down Shift while you ping, it pulls everyone in the entire game's view to that point and focuses it. So if you've moved people to a new map and they see blackness because you're using dynamic lighting and they'd have to scroll around to find out where it is, or if people are on a big world map, they're not sure where they're supposed to be looking, you can just Shift ping and it will pull everyone in the game's attention to that spot. Additionally, something that a lot of people don't know is that if you hit Z, and any player can do this, they'll get a blown up version of whatever graphic they had selected at that moment. I use this a lot in my games for like set dressing. Like, oh, there's a sword on the ground next to a pool of blood that's next to a goblet that's been knocked over. And people can look at those things and like have their characters walk over to them and hit Z to like pick them up and look at them with more detail. It's super tiny on the map, but the full image is there and can be expanded, and they can look at it and pick up clues off of it that they would have never seen from the high bird's eye view that the game usually plays in. And then just like Shift ping, if you hold down Shift Z when you do it, everyone in the entire game has that experience of it pops up this shadow box with the image expanded for them.
Steve, I had no idea.
Yeah. This is why I like doing these panels, because there's so many cool power user tools in here that make
Right.
running your games more powerful, easier to do. And I want to make these easier to find for people, whether it's tutorial videos or changing the UI to make them more visible and accessible as tools. But there's lots of these hotkeys that are baked into Roll20 that give a lot of functionality that lots of GMs, even experienced GMs, haven't found yet.
Yeah, so I've been a Roll20 user since the beta testing, because I was a Kickstarter backer and everything. I've been on this platform for 6 years, had no idea about this feature. None. This is going to change my Gumshoe games forever.
I love it.
Mine too. So speaking of Alt and Shift, it does things on all kinds of tools, like including the draw tool. Let me get something other than pink that'll be easier to see. So that white, because this is a fairly dark background. So for example, by default, it draws a square on the map. However, if you hold down Shift with the tool, it locks it to the grid. So if you're trying to make a quick and dirty building or structure, something like that on the map, and you want it, or even my favorite, which is the 2x1 horse, token, right? I think one of the traps of Roll20 is it's so easy to get cool maps that when you have to do something on the fly, you feel like you need to spend 60 seconds finding a map and setting up the map rather than the 15 seconds you'd probably spend at a table with a dry erase marker on your grid map and drawing it out that way. Don't forget these tools exist. They're super simple. People use their imaginations. We'll get through it. It doesn't matter that you didn't have the cool battle map prepared. Don't pause your game for 5 minutes to get the map set up. I mean, you can if it's a good bathroom break. People want to go get a drink. That's great. Set up your encounter. But also remember, you can just draw on this. It's the same thing that we've been doing for years with our grid maps and our dry erase markers. So Shift locks the shape tool. Alt changes it from a circle from a square to a circle, and then Alt Shift does the same thing where it'll lock it as a circle to the grid map. So you can get some pretty cool, easy geometric blobs down to represent trees, to represent buildings, to represent a crate. Color tools pretty quick to switch through. So I do the brown one for the crate, and then I want to pop over here and I'm going to do the red one for a fire. You can get enough that's flavorful out in 60 seconds that you have a whole scene going, and then I had talked about the power of the Compendium before, but then, the great thing is that even for pretty heavy games like Dungeons & Dragons, Pathfinder, ones that have fairly complex, like I know whenever I used to run 4th edition Dungeons & Dragons, it'd take me half an hour just to copy from the different various parts of the monsters manual down all of the notes that I needed to run the NPCs for that encounter. But now I can just go, well, my encounter is going to be 3 goblins and a hobgoblin, and I just drag out some goblins and a hobgoblin down onto it, and there I am. I'm ready to go. So like here's my whole encounter. It's got the character sheet that gets automatically generated. It has all of the attacks that are ready to go. This guy's got a firebolt because he's a sorcerer. There's his attack all ready to go with one click. I didn't have to memorize any of his stats. I didn't have to reproduce any of his stats. So I could do an entire encounter probably if I know what I want to be in the encounter inside at most 120 seconds. I can get the road squiggled on the map. I can get the trees. I can get the campsite in there. I can grab the 6 guys that are going to be in the fight, and we're ready to go. I think
I've done that.
Yeah, I think the flexibility of Roll20 is something that some people lose in the forest for the trees of all the cool features. That it's incredibly easy to just play like you've always played, plus the Roll20 features.
And
Yeah.
really quick,
Yeah, go ahead.
those hobgoblins and goblins just showed up in your journal, didn't they?
They did, and in fact, the reason these goblins already came through with a different token than the D&D specifically branded stuff is because they were already set up in the journal
Oh, okay.
already. They were already in this guy's NPC section. But the brand new one that I just brought in, which was the Hobgoblin, he's right here at the top, the Hobgoblin Devastator. So as I bring them in, they're automatically added to the journal with the character sheet set up.
But yeah, I've struggled trying to draw a perfect circle in Roll20, and that's amazing. Like, you just blew my mind.
Alt Shift.
So a word of advice, don't do circles as dynamic lighting obstructions. For those of you who use dynamic lighting, they do not render well. There are too many vertices in it, so it's going to bog down the calculations that are responsible for dynamic lighting. So I'm sure dynamic lighting's probably turned on for somebody in here. I'll turn it on for this bugbear. If nothing else, I'll give him a torch of, what's a torch? Is it 60-30?
2020, I think.
40-20? I think it's 40-20.
Yeah.
And he has sight. I'll just give a look at what the dynamic lighting looks like. So this guy's wielding a torch, and so this guy has columns, and he's done X's in them, which I think is a pretty good technique. So you can kind of still see the makeup of what the column looks like without completely obfuscating it. But there's no way that you could look through it from any angle, right? Plus, I love dynamic lighting. I think it's so immersive, especially with dungeon crawls, with games where you're going into unknown spaces that are dangerous. The atmosphere that dynamic lighting brings to the experience is just immersive and fun.
I set up dynamic lighting for my Dungeon World game.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even though it's Dungeon World and we can play it entirely Theater of the Mind, but I'm like, why not?
Okay, so moving on to some other cool tips and tricks. So we've got, that's the Character Mancer. Let's not use the Character Mancer right now. I'm going to, he doesn't have almost anything set up, but I'm going to make him a barbarian. And from the compendium, I'm going to find a longsword. And I'm going to, oh, that's a proficiency. I want the item longsword. And that sets up the attack for him, right? So now we have the one-click longsword attack. And if you're a barbarian, you probably don't have that too many. You're not like a spellcaster where you have a ton of actions going on and you need to have them set up. We have token actions, and we have macros that every player can have set up for them, and a quick bar that exists right down here. If you haven't made yourself a macro, and this could be hitting stuff, and it's just a 1d20 plus 5 roll, something super simple as our first macro. And I can just put it down here in my macro bar. Something that a lot of people don't know is you can rename it by right-clicking right here. You can also change the color of it if this is useful to you.
I had no idea.
By changing like the color codes, you can rearrange the order of these by grabbing this little handle right here and reorganizing them. And then another thing you can do is anything that's a button on a character sheet. So basically everything that lights up as I'm moving it, every skill, every save, every ability check, and my longsword, which is the thing that I'm assuming my barbarian is going to use all the time. I can drag my longsword button right on down here and add it straight to the hotbar. It's got this big, long, ugly name because it's got to be attached to Esren Estrafala, the character, but I can just come in here, rename it to my longsword attack, and all of my weapon attacks are red, and I can get my setup that way. The other thing that can be done with these guys is for it to be set up as a token action, so that way when I have, let's change Bugbear to be, or this bugbear, instead of being Devastator, it is I don't even remember our character's name.
Something. Started with an E. Isran Astrafla.
You got it.
Yep.
So now that I've attached this token to that character, anytime I have this token selected, that token action macro is going to be hovering right here on the top of the page. So you can have ones that you want for all characters, like if you're the GM, or you can have token specific ones that are only pop up when the represented character is selected. So I think that's a pretty cool tool as a GM to organize roles. I know a lot of people like playing where they don't, even though we've tried to make it as easy as possible with the alt double click to open up the character sheet. We've tried to make it easy and fast. Still, some people prefer to not even have that step. And if they want to take the time and prep it, they can have all the NPC monster roles set up right here as token actions. So that way they can just click the token, do its attack without ever having to even open up the character sheet. And again, one of the things I love about Roll20 is its flexibility. You can optimize this for whatever is the best way to play for you.
Steve, you want to walk through the making a deck? Because, you pointed out that we have a playing card deck, but one of the things that that I know in the indie gaming community right now, card-based games are becoming a little more popular, and being able to make your own deck is sort of it's kind of a handy tool. I used it in Drama System for what is essentially initiative, even though because you don't roll for initiative, you just determine who goes first, second, and third. And so and usually you do that with index cards. We don't have index cards.
Yeah.
But one of the things
I'm going to change games.
Yep.
I think I have this on staging where I ran a Deadlands game, and
you're on dev.
I think it's on dev. I think that's where I ran it.
Okay.
Hopefully,
because you said you were on staging, so I want to make sure.
You're right. I'm on dev.
Okay.
And I think I have some custom decks in this game. One of the times I've used it. Yep. So I put in poker chips because that's an important part of playing both Deadlands Classic and Deadlands Reloaded. Is people have to be able to drag out n number of white, red, and blue chips, with white being the majority. So that's why I'm pulling lots of white chips. Eventually, I'll find a different color in here. But let me recall them all and shuffle. And shuffle it. And then, there we go. Now I'm getting some different. So red, white, and blue. And basically the players can then, this is visible to all of them. They can go in and they can pull their poker chips for every game as they needed to. And it's the right number of fate chips is what they're called in that game. And in here you can see I set it up. There's actually better ways than this now. This I did probably 5-6 years ago. But now you can weight cards so that there's more. Instead of having to have one for each level, I can say, well, there's 20 of these versus 10 of those versus 5 of those. So there's some better systems in place now. But then I also, because I had bought and purchased the Deadlands deck of cards a long time ago, I scanned them in and put them in because I wanted a flavored, because you needed more than one deck of cards for the game. The GM has a deck of cards and the players have a deck of cards. So I wanted cards that were visually distinct from one another in order to play. But I've seen people handle all kinds of things, either chits or tokens or meeples as infinite decks that you can just keep pulling from. I've seen people do it with Settlers of Catan with the hex tiles. so that way that they can just draw from a deck, which is actually them just randomizing the tiles for the game as they get laid down. Same thing with sheep and wood and whatnot. Those are just infinite decks of one card so that people can pull as many of those as they need to into their hands. So creating these decks are pretty cool, and have a lot of there's a lot of flexibility in them too. Like you can create the decks so that the players can see all the cards, or maybe the players can pick specific cards from the deck rather than having to draw them randomly. Or maybe the players can even see the discard pile. Maybe they can pull from the discard pile. Can the players see each other's hands, or do they only see the backs of each other's cards so they know how many cards the other players have but not what they are? Can they not even see that? So there's a lot of flexibility for your game's rules. And I ranted pretty early in this segment that there's even more here that I think we could do, and there's other stuff I've written down. There's notes sitting right next to my desk on the changes that I'd like to add.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, like that's one of those things where if a character, this is when I'm working on something, if a character sheet can't do it, I look to, can a macro or a card deck do it? And a lot of times I can set up a card deck to do it. And I'm thinking of games like, well, I mean, some of them are explicitly card games or card-based games, like Restless is a wonderful indie game, and it's all like each scene is called using cards, right? And so you could put that information into a deck and just draw as you go into scenes, and then storytell from there. There are some very creative things that are being done with cards and indie games right now that I'm kind of excited about, because I kind of want to start playing around with that. Although I'm also aware that there's a barrier to entry for people who are like, when you're doing game design and everything, and you're designing it as a physical thing, there's a barrier to entry if you're overseas. And then of course, if you make it where, hey, no, you could just get the cards on Roll20 and play it on Roll20, then there's no shipping. And that is another thing, is card decks, for example, that's something that people offer in our marketplace. We didn't even get into any of that part, but one of the things that is really powerful in Roll20 is that we have this marketplace for independent creators who are making, art assets, tokens, maps, modules, add-ons, just, all kinds of information or game related assets, and they're right there. And we have, hundreds of creators right now.
Oh, at least.
Yeah. Some of them are the big names. We've got Wizards, we've got Paizo, but we also have, Fall of Magic is on Roll20 as a module. It was one of the first modules that I ever got on Roll20. And we have other independently made token sets and everything like that, which I think that's one of the things that I think is this is not a part that Steve and I necessarily have a whole lot of skin in this game, but I'm really proud of our team and especially our licensing and marketing manager, because they have done a great job of fostering that part of the gaming community on Roll20.
Just in general, I think our community is awesome. The people who contribute to the character sheets and the API scripts and the translations on Roll20, but then, our marketplace creators and all of the amazing, beautiful, crazy cool work that they do. Like, I really love role-playing games. And seeing a place like these communities grow up around role-playing games and facilitating them and making new games and making new content and new adventures. It's awesome. And the
I
people
think it's exciting that there are people on our marketplace who are paying their rent with sales from the marketplace.
Yeah.
That
As the community grows, it creates a space for more people. There's more people using it, so there's more room for people to do this more seriously, which just improves the products across the board.
Yeah. So anyway, so it's 11:30, which I think means that our time is up. Thank you, Robert and Chris, for being here. Robert, thank you so much for fielding questions from the chat and everything. I really appreciate that, because I only have the one monitor, so I can't have like 5 windows open. And it was lovely to talk to everybody.
No, thank you for being here.
Yes, it was very enjoyable, and I appreciate all the information. I've learned at least 5 new things this morning that I didn't know after years of playing. So
Me too.
That's why I love doing these. So
yeah. So anyway, thanks a bunch. And I think this will be archived on YouTube, and we'll probably put a link up in the Roll20 social media spaces as well. I used my personal account for setting this all up because I did think ahead and didn't get it set up on Roll20. So kind of a crossover there right now. But yeah, we'll have that available and stuff. So. Anyway, thanks a lot, and thanks for anybody who's stuck with us for the last hour and a half. Thanks for watching, and I hope you learned a lot.
bye, everybody.
thanks, Faz. Goodbye.